Hey everybody, if you like stuff other than just me in your ear holes, let me recommend that you check out Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman by Richard Feynman, which you can go get for free over at audibletrial.com/JKWD. That's right, get Feynman's memoir or just about anything else. 180,000 titles plus including magazines, periodicals, newspapers, and a whole bunch of audiobooks. audibletrial.com/jkwd. Get a free audiobook and a free month at Audible. We're also brought to you today by BarkBox. You got a furry friend by your side. Go ahead, go to joshshear.com. Click on the show notes for episode 46. Click through on the link to BarkBox and get a free month there. They will help keep the lights on here. They give you a bunch of treats and toys and tools and other stuff for your puppy. All right, let's get on with it, huh? Hey everybody, thank you for being here. This is episode 46, which means we must be about 6 weeks away from having done this for a year. I greatly appreciate you being here, and it would be fantastic if you'd go over and leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you're getting this, to help more people find the show. We're going to jump around a lot today, but I thought that maybe we'd start with Milo Yiannopoulos and how the left is kind of hurting ourselves right now by being regressive and repressive and instead of progressive. I should say that we are recording this on Thursday, the 23rd of February 2017, which is why this stuff is relevant today and might not be in 6 years, but some of it will be anyway, whenever you're finding this. So, Milo left his job at Breitbart, the conservative, I don't even know if conservative's the right word, alt-right nationalist publication, formerly run by Steve Bannon, who is now sitting in the White House with the president, probably controlling the puppet strings, but far be it from me to suggest that. And I know it's been hard for people like me and those of us who tried to do the campaign season with facts. It's been really difficult, but I fear that we're slipping way in the other direction, and it's not helping. We're slipping into violence, and we're slipping into shouting down, and we're slipping into I don't even know. We're slipping into regression and repression instead of progression. Like I said, Milo Yiannopoulos. For those who don't know who he is, he gay British Jew who holds somewhat conservative views. He holds conservative enough views to have been writing for Breitbart for a few years, but he got himself kicked off Twitter. Twitter said that he incited personal attacks on the actress Leslie Jones, and they had previously unverified him, which is a weird move because he was still him. He just unearned the blue check or whatever. But back in July of 2016, so we're talking, 6.5 months ago, he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and Joe Rogan, you probably know if you're listening to me, is a comedian and an MMA commentator, and he's had Milo on a couple of times, and Milo just every other thing he says is meant to be provocative and get a reaction, and is not seriously. I mean, he's the real life version of an internet troll, where he's just saying stuff to people will, just go crazy. One of the things he said was that he was not molested by a priest at 14, rather um, he was the predator in that relationship, and that and the maybe relationships between teenage boys and adult men was not a bad thing, and it was clearly not meant to be taken seriously. But here we are, fast forward 6 months. Here, let's put it out there too that the people heard it. It's not like it was this podcast where there might be a couple of dozen people listening to this in the first week or so it goes out, and if I'm lucky, someday there will be over 100. But I mean, certainly, I know that the YouTube for that show is over 1.3 million. If it was a low download count for Rogan's podcast, he probably got 3 or 4 million downloads. So people definitely heard it. It's not like nobody heard it when it first played. So Milo's been back in the news lately. There's some riots when he was going to speak at UC Berkeley. Protesters shut it down. Those protests got violent. Now, there are people who say, "Hey, let him talk, free speech," but free speech doesn't come with a right to a platform and a right to being paid for it and a right to an audience. It just comes with the right to say whatever you want. And that's mostly what you want, right? It has nothing to do with actually what you want. And so we could have done that with a little more class. But after that, it kind of spiraled out of control. He was on Bill Maher, and actually that interview was fun. It was clearly some comedy. Maher's show is political in nature, and Bill Maher himself is left leaning, and Milo's right leaning, and it was definitely a conversation between a couple of comics, and I thought it played out fairly nicely. But somebody went back in through Milo's history at that point, after he was on Maher's show, and excerpted the kind of boy man love trolling comment from Rogan's podcast, and they released that, and they kind of put together kind of a I don't know, a hate portfolio for him, and they got his Simon and Schuster canceled his book contract. He got uninvited from the Conservative Political Action Committee keynote that he was going to give, and he wound up having to quit Breitbart before they fired him. Other people were threatening to leave and all that stuff. So, do I think that Milo Yiannopoulos is do I think that his views are a little extreme and potentially dangerous? Sure, yeah, I do. Do I think that he deserves to be railroaded? No, no, and I think that we shouldn't do it, because by taking his stuff out of context and acting violent against him, we as the left we're sinking to the same levels that we're accusing other people of having done, and we're pulling away from facts and reality, and it's hurting our cause. I will say that. So again, I'm not siding with Milo. I'm siding against his opposition. Just look at it that way. That we're going about this wrong, folks. We need to We need to come back to reality and fact-based arguments. If you lose a fact-based argument, well, you know what? There's no there's no cure for people who won't listen to facts. So, we're having the same problem too in some of the town halls that we're seeing. I guess Buddy Carter, who's the first congressional rep here in Georgia, first district uh, congressman, his town hall in Savannah. On Monday Tuesday it was an overflow crowd. But when people didn't like the questions or didn't like the answers, they were booing, they were shouting over people. Boo when you don't get the answer. Disagree, demand answers. Now, I will say this about at least Buddy Carter's website. His issues are his issues page is like, this is bad, it needs to be redone, and there's a lot of here's a problem with no solution. And unlike say Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, who didn't hold a town hall during the recess week, where people just kind of decided to organize one and invite him to get beaten up. He didn't show up, so they just hung a suit up and streamed the whole thing on Facebook Live, which was a little weird, but I'm going to try to remember to link that in the show notes because I didn't add it beforehand, so hopefully I'll remember to do that. Anyway, if you want a little more measured outlook and you can handle the us versus them, that I really have a problem with. Pod Save America and Pod Save the World are a couple of podcasts put out by Crooked Media. They're fairly new, a few weeks old. Thanks to my brother Mike for passing along those shows because they're really interesting. They're by people who used to work for President Obama. They they were just staffers, White House staffers, so they actually know like the day-to-day stuff that you and me that we don't know about because we don't know. We get to see what the press sees and all that stuff, but we don't we don't know who the president calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. We don't know who calls the president at 3 o'clock in the morning when something happens, right? So they have all that information. It's just it's what they did for a living for some of them 6 or 8 years. So interesting show. You learn a lot from it. They're linked up in the show notes. One more piece of politics I want to talk about, and here's one I'm kind of split on. All right, so Immigration Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, has been given kind of new powers to just go ahead and detain people who are in the country illegally and to deport them. Now, the 14th Amendment says in part that no state should deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. So, yes, by overstaying visas or by not having visas, by just sneaking across the border, you've committed a crime, but you haven't been given due process if you're just being returned, if you're just being deported. So, I don't know what to tell you there. And I think that there's so much more nuance that we're missing, and we need to get into the nuance of the legislation, and that's what we've been missing the past few administrations, right? People's main problem with President Obama when he spoke was that it was professorial. Like you just didn't understand a word he said. People just glazed over because he went into all the intricacies of the stuff. And the big change from President Bush before him, who made up words like misunderestimate, and said things like mission accomplished and we're still in those wars a dozen years later. And uh, when the Trump travel ban got shot down, some of the problem was there was no nuance. It was just they wrote the thing, they didn't run it through legal. They just said, "Here's the deal," and that's going to get rewritten, and it's going to find some legal grounds somewhere, some legal middle ground, but it requires nuance, and we need that with with this deportation law too. One of the things that you're going to hear a lot about with this is DACA, the Dreamer legislation that Obama put in place. Now, what Dreamers are is here. We'll give you an example. Let's say that mom and dad sneak across the border with a 4-year-old. 4-year-old is now 25 and gets pulled over for speeding. Never lived in Mexico. Never, they grew up speaking English, and uh, they have no connection anywhere but the U.S. They've been here, all their formative years, their entire adult life to this point. If you send them to Mexico, you're not helping them, and you're hurting them, but you're also potentially hurting the U.S. because they've grown into a productive member of society. The only thing they don't have is legal residence. And what do you do if you send them to Mexico? All you do is you create an enemy for yourself. If you're worried about all the criminals in Mexico, well, here's one more, because now they're going down there, they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture, they can't find a job, and they hate the U.S. for sending them back, or for sending them there, for the first time in their conscious life. So here's where nuance has to come in. We can't make legislation black and white. There's no just... It's like I've been saying with the teams, the Team D, Team R, there's got to be nuance. We got to stop just drawing a line. Seth Godin actually had a blog piece recently that said, don't draw lines because lines don't bend. And if you're going to draw a line, don't draw it in the sand, because sand, come on, you can do better than that. So anyway, hey, I want to get off of politics for a little bit and come back into kind of building a conscious life. And I've been, if you've been listening to this podcast the last few months, thank you. And thank you for dealing with, thank you for going through some of that shit with me, because, I was really scared running into, from the election up through Inauguration Day, and right around then, I started to kind of formulate the idea of what I'm scared of and all of that. And so you can go back through my archives and listen, read some blog posts at joshshear.com too, because there's a lot of long thought out stuff. And well, I think some of that's still a problem. There are ways to build a life that don't require you to be subject entirely to the government. And one of those ways, or some of those ways, is to work creatively, to kind of build. I'm not saying like extra legal. I'm not saying doing things against the law. I'm saying that there are things you can do that you can be a human that the government barely influences, right? And if you are in a job that relies on import export, you're heavily reliant on government policy. If you are in a union position, you are heavily reliant on government policy. Um, Especially if you're in a union in a right to work state like Georgia, which is the real language says that that if your company is represented by a union, that you don't have to join the union. You can still work for the company, but the other thing that gets affected there legally is that um, you're not guaranteed your right to your position, even if it's been negotiated by the union. That piece of the contract doesn't hold up for Georgia like it does in other states. You try to, if you violate that piece, you violate some trust, and you have a problem there as an employer. But if you want to just lay off 10,000 people, you don't really have to negotiate it if you don't want to. You can just do it. Anyway, so like I said, there are ways to work around that government, and from the perspective of work and what you do, I'm going to take this quote from Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art, and I think this is a book that I read when I'm not, when I'm blocked and all that stuff. But I think everybody should read it if you have any struggle with anything. If you're tired of cooking the same meal, if if you need a new thing to do on the weekend, just take the couple hours to read the book. But Stephen Pressfield writes, of any activity you do, ask yourself, if I were the last person on earth, would I still do it? Of any activity you do, so this is work, this is living day to day, this is your hobbies, this is any of that stuff. Of any activity you do, ask yourself, if I were the last person on earth, would I still do it? And I look around at my life and so much of what I do, yes, I absolutely would. Even my job, while I gather news and send it out to other people, and while I'm talking to you here, and while people read what I write, be it the stuff that I've published, or stuff that just goes up on joshshear.com on the blog, any of that stuff, yeah, I'd still do it. I'd still want to know what's going on, and I'd still need to kind of talk my way through it and write my way through it, and like look at how I understand the world. And so that gives me great hope for me. I can't say what it does for anybody else. Can't say what it does for anybody else, but like I said, gives me great hope for me. So I'll read it one more time for you. Of any activity you do, ask yourself, if I were the last person on earth, would I still do it? You tell me. Would you still be doing what you're doing? Your hobbies, your job, etc. Hey, Stephen Kotler was on Lewis House's podcast talking about his new book, Steel and Fire. And, I've talked about his book, Rise of Superman, here before, and talked about flow states and all that stuff. But the new book's out. I'm looking forward to getting my copy. I was going to pre-order it from Amazon, and I changed my mind and said I'm going to go get that locally over at eShaver. And I went in there today, and she didn't have any copies, but they ordered one for me. They'll do the same for you. They usually get those on Thursdays. Sometimes they don't come in until the following Monday or Tuesday. I mean, I went in on Wednesday, so I may not get it tomorrow or today by the time you're hearing this, but I should have it next week. What I do have here, and well, I'll finish saying what I'm saying, but the flow industry, the idea of just kind of changing your consciousness, is a $4 trillion business right now, and we're going to see a lot of people doing a lot more interesting stuff that they would do if they were the last person on Earth. And that brings me to kind of the superhero thing that I was just mentioning. You know, Kotler's previous book was The Rise of Superman. It really talks a lot about action adventure sports. Like Superman, like people actually, almost actually flying. With wingsuits or skis, or jumping out of helicopters with skis, that kind of stuff. But superheroes come in all shapes, sizes, and in all walks of life. And this is from Tim Ferriss's new book, Tools of Titans. I'm going to excerpt from this paragraph, but it's in the introduction. If you want to pick up your own copy, I got a link in the show notes. Superheroes you have in your mind, such as idols, icons, titans, billionaires, etc., are nearly all walking flaws who've maximized one or two strengths. Humans are imperfect creatures. You don't succeed because you have no weaknesses. You succeed because you find your unique strengths and focus on developing habits around them. Everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Everyone struggles. Take solace in that. So, understand that if you're looking up to somebody, if you want to be like somebody else, if you think they're perfect, if you look at, I don't know, Richard Branson, Warren Buffett, you look at Mark Cuban, you look at LeBron James, these are not perfect individuals. These are flawed individuals who have a couple of strengths, and they do everything they can to make sure those strengths count. And you can do the same thing. I will read this excerpt again. If you have your copy of the book, if you need to find it, it's on page 23 of the introduction. That's back in the Roman numerals, XXIII. Section 2, under the 2 principles. The superheroes you have in your mind are nearly all walking flaws who've maximized one or two strengths. Humans are imperfect creatures. You don't succeed because you have no weaknesses. You succeed because you find your unique strengths and focus on developing habits around them. Everyone is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Everyone struggles. Everyone struggles. You can take solace in that or not, but everyone does struggle, and I don't know. That's where we're at. I hope you got something out of this. This was a thinky week for me, and I really hope that you're thinking these days. 'Cause I think that's more important than just about anything else we could be doing. Think a lot, learn a lot, read a lot, listen a lot, love a lot. And you have yourself an excellent week.